unanimous in their hate for me, and I welcome their hatred.
What is up, everybody? This is Hater Radio. My name is Chris McLean. On a somber note tonight, Ian is not with us because of the Hurricane Milton that's coming possibly to the Tampa Bay area. So, already everyone's dealing in the Bay Area with what happened with Hurricane Helene. I'm from St. Pete, and I know at least 20 people that have lost a lot of their possessions because of the flooding that happened. And I think there was around 11,000 people had their houses flooded. A lot of people got lucky, though, which is good, but it's still been a really somber last couple of weeks. And now with this possible hurricane coming, it's definitely keeping things in perspective. And it's just think of the people that are there. Think of the people in North Carolina and Georgia. We're thinking about everybody and praying for everybody, and hoping that this one isn't severe. I mean, I don't even know what to make of it, because it looks like right now it's going to be a Category 4 in the Gulf, and then possibly hit the west coast of Florida as a Category 3, which is pretty severe. So thinking about everybody, hoping it goes all right. I know it's going to be pretty touch and go the next couple of days. Looks like Wednesday is about when it'll hit shore. So we'll definitely be thinking about everybody, and hopefully Ian, he may not be back this week, but next week that we can see him, and hopefully everybody's all right. So just thinking about that. Obviously it's a real extreme circumstance with these hurricanes, but let's jump into it. So Hater Radio is a college football media brand, and what we do every week is we talk about the games, and on Sundays we recap all the games. So we're going to recap the games here for week 6. The first game that we had, the big game on Friday night, which was Syracuse and UNLV, just a tremendous game. UNLV was back and forth with Syracuse. They took a late lead. Syracuse ties it. Both of these teams are really good. McCord, I know people remember that name because he was with Ohio State last year, but I don't think people realize how good Syracuse has been playing. They beat Georgia Tech earlier, and this win here against UNLV was huge. So it sets up a lot of stuff for them for the rest of the year. But UNLV was right there the entire way, and they get the field goal. UNLV to go ahead in overtime, and then Syracuse gets the late touchdown, and the touchdown was so dramatic. It was number one for Syracuse, with the handoff, and he's just chugging towards the end zone, and Woodward, the linebacker for UNLV, just trying everything in his might to stop him from going in, and it was just like this one-on-one battle. And it looked like the linebacker Woodward was winning it, and it kept going laterally, and then he just couldn't hold on any longer, and the running back got in. It was fitting of the entire game, because it was that hard fought between the two teams. Syracuse wins 44-41. UNLV is not out of this. They still have a really good shot of getting the G5 position for the college football playoffs, so they have a lot to play for. Syracuse, like I said, the ACC is wide open right now. They have a bunch of tough games. Pittsburgh, BC, Vatech. Cal is a tough game, even after last night, what we saw. And then Miami to close it out. So, the Syracuse team could mess around and really, be a bit of a player in the ACC. We won't know till later on, but this next couple of games, Pitt, Vautech, BC, for sure, we'll see where they end up on the end of that, and they might have a shot, an outside shot. But good for that first year head coach. I can't remember his name, but he seems to be turning things around, which is pretty interesting because, he definitely made a splash by getting Kyle McCord last year in the portal. Okay, moving on. One of the teams we cover, UCLA, going up against Penn State early on Saturday. It never really was in doubt. Penn State had a small lead at first, and then, kind of closed out that second quarter with another late touchdown. So they kind of paced themselves, and then in the third quarter, they really just distanced them completely, and it was like 24-3. Drew Alar had a decent game. He wasn't great, but he definitely wasn't terrible. UCLA kept them in check for the most part, offensively, but defensively, Penn State played pretty well, and Justin Martin got the start for UCLA, and he struggled for a little bit, but he was able to move the ball in good succession, but it wasn't getting the end result because they weren't able to score a lot most of the game. They were down, they scored the touchdown late. It was like 16 seconds left in the game. So, it was misleading 27-11. It really was 27-3 for a good portion of this game. But, UCLA maybe figuring things out with this new quarterback. Garbers obviously wasn't it. And Martin seemed to be a difference maker because he can move the ball on the ground as well. The run game is still an issue for UCLA. But Justin Martin was effective enough in the ground game to be able to get Penn State to have to respect that. Because with Garbers, there's really not a ground game there. So the RPO action isn't working. But with Justin Martin, there's actually a threat, and he's a big guy too. So this Penn State team, undefeated going into their USC game next week. I might go to this one. I really want to go to it because I haven't been to a USC game actually ever since I've been in LA. I don't know how that's possible. I've been to like quite a few tailgates, and then like there was a moment where I was like about to go in the stadium. My now wife was in the stadium, but like for some reason I just didn't end up going to the game. So yeah, I'm hoping to go to that game. Penn State undefeated. We'll see what they do the rest of the year. They have a pretty tough schedule because the next couple of weeks they have like USC, and then they have Ohio State, and Washington is going to be a tough one, and the rest of them are pretty easy. But yeah, so Ohio State, USC, and Washington should be tough games for them. Yeah, just in this game, a lot of drives that didn't result in points, 2 fourth downs deep in Penn State territory that were converted. So UCLA had their chances. They just couldn't convert. And maybe that's a step for the future, that this is just a building moment that they'll have here. Who knows? I mean, I'm kind of selling on UCLA stock right now. I was kind of optimistic at the beginning of the year, but now I'm very pessimistic on them, which is a shame because last 3-4 years they had done so well, and now it's like they're really in the doldrums. So, okay, moving on to Texas A&M, Missouri in College Station. Missouri just laid an egg. Texas A&M wins 41-10. This game was never close. At halftime, it was 24-0. They scored right at the jump of the third quarter as well. So it was 31-10 or 31-0 right away into the second half. And they had no shot. And Texas A&M outgained them 512 to 254. And a lot of those yards that Missouri got were garbage time yards that, like, at that point, the game didn't even matter. So it was kind of futile. You know, Texas A&M defensively looks really good. To hold that explosive an offense to that low of an output, 10 points, and only 186 yards passing, that is pretty tremendous. And, you know, their offensive output was ridiculous. I was totally surprised. Connor Wegman actually played in this game, replacing Reed. And, you know, Wegman looked good. You know, he's often injured throughout his career, but there are moments that he has that he looks really good. So, you know, again, he was highly recruited coming in. You know, maybe he's finding his form, and who knows what this A&M team can do, because right now they're 5-1. They beat one of the toughest opponents on their schedule, and they have, outside of LSU and Texas, their schedule is pretty manageable. And you know, I'm not the biggest I'm not fearful of LSU in any way. So, and it's in College Station, so Texas A&M has a really good shot at beating LSU. Really, only the rest of the year, their only threat is Texas, which obviously Texas is the best team in the country with or without Ewers, but I believe Ewers should be back by then. He should be back soon. I think this is their bye week, so he should be back next week, hopefully. But yeah, so Texas A&M, you know, has a clear shot at, one, the SEC championship game, and then two, pretty assuredly a playoff spot, which I don't think anybody saw coming into this year. But Mike Elko, you got to say a lot for him, because he came in from Duke, you know, did really good things at Duke, and now he's done tremendous things already at Texas A&M. 5-1 start, you know, and the sky's the limit right now, because this is just the beginning. I mean, he had a very fortunate recruiting base to start with, because, you know, Jimbo, as much as he wasn't that good of a coach the last couple of years, he still was able to get the recruits there. I believe the 21 class or 22 class was the highest rated recruiting class ever. And so there was a ton of talent on this team. There was some that left, but there was a lot that was still there. And, you know, Elko just jumped right in and took advantage of the talent. And he's 5-1. And the only loss was, the first game of the year against Notre Dame. So honestly, it doesn't look that terrible. I know Notre Dame hasn't looked amazing since that loss to Northern Illinois, but Texas A&M still looks pretty good. And like I said, schedule is very favorable. Okay, moving on to SMU, Louisville. Dude, this was a back and forth game the entire time. You know, SMU goes up, you know, they're up 24-13 at half. And then Louisville storms back in the third quarter. SMU gets the late touchdown to go ahead. You know, Tyler Shuck had a really good game. I mean, this kid, honestly, I'm amazed how well he is playing, because I never thought he could throw over 15, 20 yards. Like, it never seemed like he did with Oregon, you know, 3-4 years ago, which is crazy that it's been that long. But he was at Texas Tech last couple of years, and now with Louisville. But Jennings for SMU, dude, huge game. He had nearly 400 yards of offense, 113 on the ground. Just amazing game by him. He was all over the place, just making plays with his arm and legs. You know, for Louisville, you know, who was amazing, which kind of it stinks in the fact that they lost, but Ja'Cory Brooks, dude, 3 catches, 120 yards, 2 TDs. He looked really good. And I can't remember where he was at before he transferred in, but kid's a stud. And Shuck definitely was looking for him plenty of times. And, you know, this game was so close back and forth. You know, Shuck had chances for them. They just couldn't capitalize. And, you know, just a a great game. Honestly, this SMU team now sets themselves up well for the rest of the year because their schedule is not that crazy hard because I don't think they play Miami and I don't think they play Clemson. And Louisville now has 2 losses, one only in the ACC, so there's still a player in the ACC. But SMU sets themselves up well because they only really have the Pitt game and maybe Boston College and Cal, but that's it. Like at this point, with them only losing to BYU non-conference, they have a really, really good shot at getting to the ACC championship game, which is amazing because they are paying to be in the ACC and they're not making any money off of being there, and they're going to win potentially the conference. I mean, can you imagine that the first year in the conference and they win it already? And if Miami doesn't win it because SMU does, like if SMU beats them, that would be hilarious because Miami's been in there for 20 years now, and if they still don't win, oh, that would be, dude, just icing on the cake. But next game we had was Auburn, Georgia, a real snoozer. Auburn, I mean, they got the game to 10-14, but they were never really in this game. You know, Georgia didn't do a ton in this game. It wasn't like they were like dominating per se, you know, because the stats were relatively even, but they just, I don't know, they capitalized on their drives while Auburn really couldn't, and you know, were able to convert more third downs and fourth downs, and that's probably the difference here in the game. That's what it looks like. Yeah, because it's even almost everything else. And you know, like Georgia's just a way better team than Auburn, and you know, I thought Auburn would start to make noise, but it seems like they've regressed from last year. Last year, they seemed like there was more potential, but they've taken a step back, especially at 2-4. Georgia now has that win. They have quite a schedule after the next couple of weeks. They play Texas, Florida, Ole Miss, Tennessee, and Georgia Tech to end it. I mean, that is 5 really tough games. The Florida game, probably the weakest of all of them, but Tennessee, Ole Miss, Texas, and then the topper at the end, the Georgia Tech. That honestly, after seeing Georgia Tech the last couple of weeks, I really feel like they're going to compete in that game. They competed last year in that game. So let's move on. Iowa, Ohio State. This game wasn't close either. Iowa's offense is just putrid. They can't really move the ball at all. They threw for 98 yards. You know, just ugly, or 110. You know, 226 total. I mean, granted, Ohio State's defense is really good. There's a lot of talent there, but Iowa's offense is just so rudimentary and Stone Age, and it sets college football back 50 years. But whatever, Ohio State looked really good. Their offense is, you know, pretty solid in this game. Jeremiah Smith had another solid one-handed catch, looked great. They were pretty, you know, pretty standard game for them this year so far. But Ohio State has a tough schedule coming up that the rest of the year is now it's starting to like set itself up where it's like, oh, there's all these easy games. Now it's like Oregon, Nebraska, Penn State, and then Michigan at the end, and Indiana. Oh my God. I'm excited about this Indiana-Ohio State game. This is going to be an interesting game getting to it. But like I said, the next couple weeks, Ohio State-Oregon is a 2 versus 3 matchup, which we don't see very often. So everyone's excited about that. And then potentially Ohio State-Penn State is a 2 versus 4, depending on what their records are like when they get there. I don't think it'll still be a 2-4, but at least we get a 2-3 out of the Ohio State-Oregon matchup. Okay. Next game we had was Ole Miss, South Carolina. Ole Miss, you know, they kind of just toyed with the South Carolina team because it was not like that far out of reach the whole time. And the second half, they didn't really score a lot of points. They only had a field goal. But, like, Jackson Dart still had a really good game, 285 yards. And South Carolina never really put a scare into Ole Miss as far as their offense. You know, Ole Miss's defense played really well and kept them in check. Lenore Sellers did not look the same as he did in the LSU game, which is a shame because if he had played as well as he did in the LSU game, I felt like South Carolina would have had a chance here, but he wasn't really that effective. 162 yards in the air and 55 on the ground and a pick. You know, it's funny because Ole Miss got the 2 fat guy touchdowns by their defensive end. Can't remember how to say his name. It's what is it? His name is Pegs or Pegas. I don't know, but big guy, got two carries, 2 TDs, very efficient. But you know, this Ole Miss team recovers off that loss to Kentucky, and everything is still available to them. They could still get to the SEC championship game. They have a lot of games ahead of them that they can prove themselves. This was definitely a good bounce back game. They have LSU next, Oklahoma, Arkansas, which would be a tough game, Georgia, and Florida. So their gauntlet is now as well. So, like, that's what the great thing about this year so far has been. I know it started off slow with a bunch of these teams playing nobodies and some of the, like, worst teams in the conferences. But now it's like we're in the meat of the schedule. And now all these teams are really starting to play each other. So we're going to really know who is the contenders and who's not, because once it gets to these next couple of weeks, you'll know by 2-3 weeks from now who is actually going to be in the playoff and who is not. Okay, well, you still won't know for sure for a while, but I'm saying, like, you'll get a better idea of some of these pretenders that'll fall to the wayside. Okay, like I was talking about, Indiana Northwestern. Indiana wins 41-24. Indiana, you know, it was really close with this Northwestern team into the fourth quarter, but then Indiana scored 2 touchdowns late to put them over. Curtis Rourke looks great. I really like this offense. Kurt Signetti is really ballsy. Had a 4th and 5 late, and he converted to be able to basically ice the game. I mean, that's the kind of thing that you want out of your coach. Like, yes, make that call. Let's go for it. Let's win this game. Let's not kick a field goal. Let's waste all this time and score another touchdown and completely end the game. That's how you win games, because, you know, if you look at it, what happened even today in the NFL earlier today with the Bills and the Houston Texans, it's like just some of the things that these coaches decide really end up being catastrophic at the end that completely dictate what's going to happen. And it's crazy that they make some very idiotic choices in the middle of the game with some of these play calling and, like, decision making, but it really is detrimental to the entire team, you know. And so you have a coach like Kurt Signetti who, you know, is going to go for it on downs like that. He's going to push the ball. He takes advantage of, you know, the team that he has. And the guy looks great. The more I'm seeing of this guy, the more I'm seeing of Indiana, I'm becoming a believer. And Indiana has never been this good in my entire life. And that's 40 years and like 32 years of watching college football. That is a long time that they've never been like anything close to this. And I am happy for them, you know, because it was always just get your, you know, butt kicked every week by all the Big Ten teams. And now it's like, dude, they're destroying people. I think they scored like 40 points like every game so far this year, which is phenomenal. And their defense is really good as well. I think Signetti said after the game that he was not a fan of how well their defense played, but still they held Northwestern to only 24 points. And, you know, it wasn't like Northwestern was moving the ball a ton. They didn't really rush the ball that well. They had to throw it for the most part because they were, playing catch up with Indiana the entire time. So I think they were effective enough defensively to obviously win this game. And offensively, they're miles better than 99% of the teams in the country. And, another 529-yard game. Just this team is real. If you want to take note right now, I didn't at first, I think that UCLA game was the wake up call, but the last couple of weeks have been like, whoa, this team is legit. So look out for them in the Big Ten. I'm calling it now. Look out for them playoff wise, because they definitely are going to be a player. Okay. Rutgers, Nebraska. Not really that great of a game. Nebraska goes up 14-0.5, and Rutgers gets a late score. Nebraska really didn't look good offensively. Raiola only 134 yards. They kind of struggled. Rutgers has a decent defense, so that's largely probably what it was. Handed to Greg Schiano, definitely getting the most out of the Rutgers talent that they have. But Rutgers offensively was putrid. 2 of 14 on third down, 2 of 6 on fourth down. So Nebraska squeaks out a win, but it wasn't really that close because Nebraska was ahead 14-0 for most of the game. The Rutgers score was very late. Okay, next game I had was West Virginia, Oklahoma State. Dude, West Virginia, outside those losses to Pitt and to Penn State, which are two very good teams, which are non-conference, this West Virginia team destroyed Oklahoma State. And I'm amazed that we even had Oklahoma State ranked as high as they were. Obviously, they were frauds. I've not been a big fan of Bowman. 2 picks here in this game. But Garrett Green had a solid game. Didn't throw the ball a ton, only 9 of 15. But he was effective on the ground, which, again, is a lot of their offense. Garrett Green had 86 yards on the ground and a touchdown. And Jaheim Wright had 158 yards on the ground. And CJ Donaldson had 77. So they really put up a ton of yards on the ground. 389. That's why they didn't throw the ball. 389 yards. That is ridiculous. To their 36 for Oklahoma State. Dude, I don't even know how that's possible. That is 389 is like a total yardage for one team, and 36 rushing is just putrid. But again, this Oklahoma State team, for whatever reason, can't run, even though they have Ollie Gordon, who was a really good running back last year. It's just their offensive line cannot block for them. So they've been, I don't know. It's really kind of ugly right now, and it's just getting worse for them. But West Virginia, 3-2. They have a ton of really tough games coming up. They have Iowa State, Kansas State, and Arizona. And those 3 are really going to dictate what happens to this team. If they can go 2-1 in that stretch, they got a real good shot at getting to the Big 10 champion or Big 12 championship. But it's going to be tough because Iowa State is a really tough team. Kansas State is, I think, I'm really, really high on Kansas State. But both those games are at home. The Arizona game is on the road. 2-1 is definitely on the table. So if they can pull that off, the rest of the schedule is pretty manageable. So we'll see. I really do like this team, and I like Garrett Green a lot. Very experienced quarterback who's very athletic. Okay. Upset of the day, maybe of the last 20, 30 years. Alabama comes into Nashville and loses to Vanderbilt. I know the real fans of college football and maybe even just the fans of this show that have watched these episodes since this year have noticed that we've talked about Vanderbilt because they played well in the Vautech game. They played well in the Missouri game, and they are a player. Diego Pavia is a solid quarterback. He put up 252 yards, 16 of 20, 2 TDs. He had a bunch of yards on the ground. Let me see what he had. He had 56 on the ground. this team is as solid as you could ask for. Defensively, they're very sound. They kept Alabama in check for the most part. I mean, obviously, they scored 35, so it's still a lot of points. And Ryan Williams looked good. Milroe, though, had a couple of turnovers that were the difference in this game because the pick six led to a 13-point margin to start off with. So they were down 2 scores already from the jump. And then they had a fumble late, and just this Vandy team kept the ball away from Alabama. Alabama only had the ball for 17 minutes. That is like a quarter of play. Vandy had it for 42 minutes. So this Vandy team is for real. They, honestly, man, the rest of the year, anyone that plays them, because for whatever reason Florida's not playing them, it's just how the schedule is setting up now for the SEC. But Vanderbilt could easily beat Kentucky. Then they have Ball State. They'd probably lose to Texas because I believe Texas is the best team in the country. They have a shot against Auburn, shot against South Carolina, and the last 2 games, LSU and Tennessee. Tennessee is a rivalry game, so anything is possible there. The LSU game, we'll see. It's in Baton Rouge, but there is a lot that Vanderbilt can make up ground there and, I don't know, win 8 games, which 8 games, I think that would be the first time since James Franklin was there like 11 years ago. So that would be tremendous for them. So I'm happy for them because I know how downtrodden that fan base has been forever. Like I said, 32 years watching the sport, and Vanderbilt has only had like 4 or 5 seasons in those 32 years of decent play, not even great play, just decent play. And that's, good for them. And I'm excited, just like for Indiana. It's nice to see schools that have not had joy for their college football have some. It is nice to see that because, the same teams all the time is whatever, but it is nice to see other teams do good as well. Okay. Clemson, Florida State, Clemson was up 17-0. They ended up at half up 23-7. This game was never really close. Florida State scores late. Cade Klubnik looked really good. He was very effective both in the air and the ground. Florida State just does not look good. Again, Clemson had 500 total yards. They probably should have had more points, but I think they were kind of just like toying with FSU. And it is interesting because like the last couple of weeks, Clemson has really like scored a ton. And I didn't get a chance to watch like the condensed game because I had 20 games to watch today. But, it seemed like Clemson just would get close and then have to settle for field goals. So credit to Florida State for sticking in the game as close as it was. But Clemson, just the better team, and Florida State is 1-5 now after going 13-0 last year. Just crazy. I don't think anybody would have saw this coming. I thought they were going to have a come back to earth year, but I didn't expect it to be this bad. They did get Brock Glenn to come in and play, the freshman, and he did all right, but he had a pick and he wasn't great. But they had to throw the ball a ton because they were down the entire time. And they barely ran the ball. I think they had like 40 yards of rushing, which is putrid. I mean, they just can't run the ball. 22 yards. That is terrible. Okay, moving on. Only reason I want to talk about this game was Genty for Boise State, who again didn't disappoint. 1/2 of playing time. He had 186 yards rushing, 3 TDs. The kid is super fast. I'm talking like freaking like lightning. The kid, this is one of the fastest running backs I've ever seen. He is very elusive, hard to tackle. He's low to the ground, so he's got like one of those just, I don't know, he can sneak by people. It's just, this kid is, I don't know how he didn't get picked up by anyone in the South because he comes out of the 904 in Jacksonville and he should have been picked up by somebody, but he wasn't for whatever reason, goes out to Boise State, and he's killing it. And he literally has over 1,000 yards already on the season. The kid is right now, he's got to be the number one for the Heisman. And I think Travis Hunter is the second. They didn't play this week, so it's always the recency bias. And so I think that Genty is leading the stable right now. I like Genty overall because I think he's putting up bigger numbers than Hunter is putting up on either of those sides of the ball. But Genty, I'm definitely a fan of this kid, and I'm excited to see what they do. But they win 62-30. Still have a shot at the G5 playoff spot. Okay. I called it, and I know I'm not trying to brag too much, but I said it. I looked at it logically. I saw how well that Arkansas had played the last couple of weeks, and I knew that they were good enough to beat this Tennessee team because I also saw how Tennessee was not that great in the Oklahoma game, and also the game that they won big, the NC State game. That NC State team was a fraud, and they proved it out because they got beat again. So this Tennessee team is good for, effective, but Nico Iamaleava, I think he's still a work in progress. And so a good defense was able to take advantage of that, which Arkansas played really good defense on Saturday. They held them in check for the most part. And Taylon Green looked great. And that's the other thing is I'm big on Taylon Green, and I thought he was really great in the Oklahoma State game and some of the other games that he's played so far this year. And he looked great in this game. He was hurt in some of it. And so they had the backup come in, which was number 3 for Arkansas, Malachi Singleton. And Malachi did well enough to win the game because it was those last couple of drives that really punched it in for Arkansas. And it's crazy when, players go out, but Taylon Green played great. They actually, honestly, they should have been ahead in this game earlier, but they couldn't finish drives, much like Clemson, and they stalled out on some drives, missed field goals. They had a ton of yards into halftime, and Tennessee had nothing, and they were shutting them out 3-0. But then Tennessee scores 2 touchdowns by Sampson, and they were up 14-3. Arkansas gets a late touchdown at the end of the third quarter, and then they get those late scores there as well. And it's just, Arkansas, I'm excited for them because this is a huge win. I have some friends that are Arkansas fans, my old boss, Jason, and you know what? I'm very happy for him because, Arkansas has been up and down all over the place the last 10, 15 years. But those fans are very faithful, and they're always there, and they're, always going to be there, and they love their team, and they're rewarded with this huge win. And, it's crazy. It was a huge upset. All day long were a lot of upsets. You had Alabama go down, Tennessee go down, Missouri go down. And then the next one we're going to talk about is Michigan going down. And Michigan, I didn't think was going to win this game anyways, but I didn't really feel like it was an upset. I know Washington was really not that great of a team coming in because they had some losses that didn't look so hot. But Will Rogers looked great in this game. They were able to move the ball a ton. They were it was a close game going into the fourth, and Michigan actually was ahead 17-14, but Washington comes into the fourth quarter, gets a field goal to tie it, a touchdown later, and then a field goal then to ice it. So this Washington team was effective. They were able to move the ball both on the ground and the air. Really only Michigan was able to run the ball, and that was it. So they really limited. Tuttle and Orji are just not that good at quarterbacks. Will Rogers is a way better quarterback. So that was kind of an advantage in that aspect. And, credit Jed Fish for getting his team ready and winning this game because Michigan was the defending national champion, but now they have 2 losses. And honestly, I feel like Michigan is setting themselves up for even a few more losses because they have Illinois next in 2 weeks, Oregon, Indiana, which I don't think they're going to beat Indiana because Indiana can score on anybody, and Michigan's defense does not look that great this year. And then Ohio State at the end. So there's at least 3 or 4 more losses, which would end up being 6-6. So we'll see. Okay. USC, Minnesota. Now, I was watching this game as I was watching the Florida UCF game, and I could have swore as I'm watching it, I'm like, oh, USC has got this one. They had the ball 17-10, and they were driving, and they were like on Minnesota's side of the 50. I'm like, oh, they got this. There's no way they're going to lose this game. And then Miller Moss gets hit, and it's an interception, and Minnesota, I believe, scored on that play or on that drive, in the ensuing drive. And then that was it pretty much because USC just couldn't do anything after that. Then Minnesota gets the ball back, and Minnesota just bleeds the clock. There's like a minute left. It's a 4th down play. It's a quarterback sneak. The guy gets in, Brosmer, but honestly, on the replay, you can't even really tell for sure. So, I don't even know what they even how things are done now, because it's like if it's inconclusive, you always say that you cannot overturn. They ruled on the field that it was not a touchdown. I don't know how you can rule that was conclusive that he scored. I mean, what they really need to do is they need to get sensors in the ball and specifically the end zone. Like, I don't care about out of bounds, whatever. I don't think they need it for that. It's not that big a deal. But to see if there's a score, they need sensors. There's no way they can't put sensors in every ball, and they can put sensors on the field to know, boom, once it's crossed, then it's a touchdown. Then you know for sure. But anyways, this is not the end for USC. I know this loss is not good, but they have a schedule that sets up well for them. Next week, they have the Penn State game in LA. They have games against Maryland, Rutgers, Washington, Nebraska, UCLA. Some of those are pretty manageable. Maybe the Washington and Nebraska game are the scariest games. And then Notre Dame to close out the year. Honestly, maybe this is a wake-up call, and they need this game to be able to be like, hey, there's a chance here to still make the playoff. Do what you can do against this Penn State team and see what the rest of the season plays out like. I feel like they're good enough to play anybody. Miller Moss did not look great in this game, but I still like him as a really good quarterback, and I felt like he was effective enough to win the game. It's just the turnovers really killed them. Jaquavius Marks had a really good game. It's a shame because this team should be scoring a lot more points. They scored a lot last week, but this week they just kind of were in check. I don't know if it was just because it was a road game and last week was a home game, but either way, it's a shame that they lost this one because now it kind of dampens the luster for this Penn State game, because it would have been a one-loss team against an undefeated team. That would have been huge ballyhoo about the game, but now it's kind of like whatever. But you know what? It's still going to be a great game, and I hope to go, and I really am going to try. So we'll see what happens. Okay, Baylor against Iowa State. Back and forth game up into the third quarter, and then Iowa State just steamrolls them by the end. They end up winning 43-21. This Iowa State team is really good. Rocco Becht had a really good game, 277 yards, 2 TDs. You know, this team is a very under the radar number 11 in the country because, you know, usually a team in the top 10, 11, you're going to know a lot about, but Iowa State really hasn't played a tough schedule. So they haven't been on, you know, I don't know. It's just Houston last week, Arkansas State, the Iowa game, but it was like a close one, North Dakota. So it's been kind of underwhelming results. They just kept winning. But this game, they steamroll Baylor in the end. They'll have some tough games. West Virginia, like I said, Utah and Kansas State at the end. So they're going to have their opportunities to show themselves. This is, again, you got West Virginia, you got Iowa State, you got Kansas State, you got Utah, even Arizona is a team out there. There's a lot of really good teams in the Big 12, and I hope at least 2 of them get in the playoff because that would be the most fair. I don't know what their records are going to be because a lot of these teams are going to beat up each other, but it would be fair that the Big 12 should get at least 2 teams. I would hope, just because there's so many good teams. I don't know if you can say that for the ACC or, some of these G5s, but, outside of Big 10 and SEC, most of these other conferences seemingly don't have a ton of teams. The Big 12's got like 6 or 7 teams that could win the conference so far. Okay, last couple of games. UCF, Florida. I wore the shirt again because I was like, I wore it in the preview show. So I was like, I'm going to wear it again because I felt like, just in a good mood, good luck streak with it. So I'm going to wear it again. And you know what? Whatever. I'm not trying to gloat here because I definitely did a lot of gloating on X Twitter. I just was happy because it was such a, tough couple of weeks being a Gator fan because it was, the losses to Miami and Texas A&M were very putrid. The offense looked terrible, and to get a decent win against a Power 4 team is something to celebrate because they haven't done that in like 6 or 7 games. So it was nice to get that win. This UCF team is not very good. The passing attack didn't scare me at all coming into the game, and it showed itself again in the game. They just were lackluster. The offensive line wasn't great. For a team that did so well in the ground game, they only had 108 yards rushing. And, honestly, it felt like it was even less because it was just Florida kept them in check almost the entire game. And, yes, the second half was terrible because Billy got conservative and there was only 3 drives in the second half. And 2 of them, I believe, were either 3 and outs or 1 first down and then a punt. So they didn't have the ball long in the second half at all, but they dominated in the first half. And that was all it really needed because UCF had nothing for them. It was 24-3 at half. And, really that late touchdown that UCF got only made it seem closer than it actually was because 24-6, that's an 18-point game. That's 3 scores. So Florida kind of cruised. They probably should have put the pedal to the metal a little bit more and threw the ball a little bit more downfield in the second half. But Billy, for whatever reason, turtles up and doesn't like to do anything that would put them at risk. This was almost a carbon copy of 2023 Tennessee game where they did almost the exact same score. I believe it was 29-16. And it was the same finish as well, where it was Florida had to barely squeak out holding the ball. But, it's a win. They move on to next week against Tennessee, but just glad to see them win. I know the turmoil of if Billy is going to be fired or not, but the players came out and played. DK had a great game. Badger had a couple early catches in the game. Montrell looked good. He was really athletic on that touchdown. Tank had a lot of good catches. I'm trying to think who else really stood out. Hansen had a couple of good catches. This game was never in doubt, like I said. And Florida, I'm glad to see the win. And DJ looked really great. He had an awesome throw to DK. This team has a lot of talent. Trey Wilson didn't even play. Andy Jean hasn't played that much. And Aiden Mizell didn't play either. So it's this team is loaded in talent. Jaden Baugh got a lot of burn. 9 carries for 30 yards. Jacoby Jackson looked really good. They didn't rush the ball as effective as they have in the past games, but they were effective enough. And especially with DJ, the RPO game works so much better. And so, when he's out there, it is very smooth. And, I liked Mertz in this game too, because he was efficient, 19 of 23. You can't argue that. But, DJ pushes the ball down the field, and that's what this offense is missing. If they can push the ball downfield, then it opens up shorter game stuff as well. With the inability to really throw it downfield with Mertz, it really kind of hampers them. So going forward, I would like to see more of DJ, but I know we're just going to keep seeing this Mertz 2 drives, DJ 1 drive, back and forth thing. Whatever. It's working right now. We'll see how it goes against Tennessee. And considering it's a much louder environment than Mississippi State was, because the crowd for Mississippi State was lackluster, but Tennessee is going to be 100,000 fans because they've only seen 2 volunteer wins against Florida in the last 20 years in that stadium. So they're definitely going to be amped up. So moving on, last 2 games, Duke, Georgia Tech. Georgia Tech was losing into the fourth quarter, and, Duke was a game opponent. They were undefeated coming into the game. Malik Murphy is not a bad quarterback. He was at Texas last year. They were effective, but I just like this Tech team. They look good against Florida State in the opening game. Jamal Haynes is a really good running back. Haynes King is effective. They win 24-14. It wasn't a great game by Tech, but they still outgained them 412 yards total to 279. They had 245 on the ground. So this Tech team is very serviceable. And like I said, they can play spoiler the rest of the year. They're only 4-2 with losses to Syracuse and who else did they lose to? Louisville. So, they're going to be an outside shot of the ACC stuff, but they have games against Notre Dame, Miami, and Georgia. So we'll see. I mean, I like their chances against probably more Miami than any of those teams, just because they will run the ball so much and their defense has gotten better. They probably have a shot against Notre Dame, though, too, because that's in Atlanta, but we'll see. Okay, moving on. Last one. Miami Cal. Oh, my Lord. I cannot believe this game. If you stayed up to watch this game, which I did, Cal was up 35-10 going late into the third quarter and just falls apart, stops playing the offensive scheme that they were playing all game, and Miami just puts it to them, scores 29 straight points, or 29 points to 3 by Cal. So it was just I cannot believe that Cal lost this game. And I have to say it. That targeting call, if you have not seen it, I don't know how that is not targeting. The booth called it down and said, you need to look at this. It wasn't even called on the field. They looked at it and they said it wasn't targeting. I don't know how in any way, shape, or form they see that replay and say that's not targeting. I have seen so many other calls throughout the history of targeting calls, and that was clearly a targeting. He lowered his head, used his head as a projectile, and hit the helmet and neck area of the Cal player. I don't know how it is not. I don't know what they saw, but 2 weeks in a row, because if that's called, that's a first down, and Cal likely runs out the clock and Miami loses that game. And the week before, Vatek scores that touchdown. It's ruled a touchdown, and then on replay gets overturned in their favor twice. In 2 weeks, Miami gets completely hinging calls on the outcome of the games, and they both go their way. It's quite remarkable considering that this is their only undefeated team in the ACC, and they're trying to protect them, obviously. And it's a shame because it's like, this was a great game. And I honestly feel like Cal should have won the game. And if it was called the way it should have been, then Cal would have won this game. But regardless, tough way to lose for Cal. You know, game day was there. It was a great environment. I am glad Cal got the notoriety that they got from both the game day and the game itself. It's terrible way to lose like that, especially when they were the more deserving team. They were the better team for 90% of the game. They just couldn't finish it off. Okay, that's the last game. What a long day of reviewing this, because I woke up at 7 and have been off and on reviewing stuff and doing all kinds of stuff all day. But that is the show. You can reach us at haterradio.com for all of our articles. You can reach us on social media where the show is posted and where it's live streamed on YouTube at Hater Radio, on X, Facebook, X, Instagram, Threads, and TikTok. It is at Hater_Radio. And for Facebook, it is Hater Radio CFB. That's the show. Be safe, everyone. If you got to evacuate, please do it sooner than later. I'll try to do the show probably tomorrow for the recap or for the preview show. But like I said, every Sunday and Wednesday, 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific. Check us out and like, subscribe, comment, follow, just everything you can for the algorithm. That really helps. All right. You guys have a good one.